Hey everybody, it's Lebo with Lebo's Pinball. We've got a 1971 Williams Honey. This is one of, I think, 6,300 or so made. And this is actually not a bad example. There is a little bit of playfield wear, but it doesn't look really too bad at all. The customer brought me this game because it wasn't working. It actually wouldn't initiate a game where you would hit the start button and the scoring motor would just run continuously, and it was doing crazy stuff with the scoring units, and just it was kind of bonkers. And so had to go through a bit to try to troubleshoot it all, and from there we upgraded a little bit. We put LED lights in, gave it new bands, replaced the rubber bands with silicone bands, and did a couple other little tricks to it, and I'm going to take you through it real quick. All right, here we go. Okay, when we first tear into it, you start looking for some of the obvious things. You're checking fuses, make sure that they're all good, and they were. No issues there. Restrooking some connectors on all the Jones plugs. That was something that I definitely checked out at first. But it was also obvious that the lock relay that's actually here, the coil on it was in rough shape. Part of it was broken off. But yeah, it was rough, so that needed to be replaced. And there's a unit here in the back that's called an alternator unit. Now that one was missing the coil completely. And there were a couple wires that they were just kind of confusing. They weren't really connected to what they needed to be connected to. It was just kind of weird. And as it turns out, I went ahead and replaced the coil, or put in a new coil and figured out what needed to go there. There was a bracket that I found that helps hold that coil in. It was sort of tucked in sort of a weird space. But I put all that back together, and it turns out that part of that this alternator unit has to deal with this whole 5-cent relay, which when you're doing free play, which this game is set up to do for this owner, I don't really know that you're even going to need this alternator unit to be totally functional. But what it does is when you're putting nickels in the coin door, if you need 10 cents, I think, to play. So if you put in 2, it uses this alternator unit to be able to properly count the coins, I believe. However, it is working correctly. By the way, I guess I didn't mention, so to actually do that work, since this is all tucked in there real deep, it's kind of impossible to really effectively do a lot of work unless you can really get in there and look at things closely. So what I do is I pull this whole board out. It's funny because it's an actual wooden board. It's a big circuit, so it's a circuit board. It's just a real primitive circuit board. But I pull this whole board out by, removing all the Jones plugs, disconnecting everything, taking all the bolts out, and bringing it out to where you can get a good look at everything. While I had it out, these stepper units, they got a lot of attention. So let's see if you can see this side. So, by taking this nut off and pulling it all apart, you can get in and clean the shaft that's inside, the spring that's on the other side, clean it. All the contacts, they get scrubbed down really carefully. Then when it's put back and you get the spring pre-tensioned, or you wrap it around a number of times and then lock it all back down, then it's good to go. And you got to make sure that you clock it all correctly. The other thing, here's another stepper unit here that also got the same kind of attention. So as I went all through that, this board was just about ready to go back in, except for one other thing that I did. And this is something that I like to do in a lot of the EM games, especially ones from the 60s and early 70s that didn't really have this employed. But you'll notice here there's that black wire, that's a new power cable that I added in. And the reason why I did it is because it has a ground prong that's actually tied into that cable. And this game actually had partial ground wiring already in here. There was a spot actually for a ground in it, and it feeds all the way over to the base of the transformer. And from there, it does feed into some other sections of the game. Actually, like right here, there's a ground wire. Let's see. where did we go? Here we go, sorry. Yeah, so a lot of these EM games, when they're not grounded, and you'll have your hand here and you will feel just a little bit of shock, and that's not cool. It's not good. So what I usually do is I ground all the games just to make them safer, especially if you're holding your hand on one game here and you got your other hand on the other one, and if one of them's grounded and the other one's not, or something's weird, you can feel it. So so it's definitely a much safer game. Moving up to the play field, spent some similar attention on the stepper units. There's one here. Took it apart, cleaned it up. Also have one here on the other side, made sure that it was all operating correctly. With all the pop bumpers and some other mechanisms, just had to go through all of it and just make sure it was working correctly. I had to adjust a few switches. There's a lot of little rollovers. There, you can see where I've got lights all through here, and the rollers. All those switches had to be cleaned and tweaked just a little bit. The flippers, so they really got I would say just about 100% rebuild. The only thing that wasn't replaced was the actual flipper bats themselves. They were in good shape, and I just kept them. But we put in actually new coils, got a new bushing, the new bell crank here, the plunger, the linkage, and you've got the I guess you call it like a bump stop, or the metal striker end where the plunger, when it comes all the way through, it strikes against that and it mushrooms over time. So that's all new. Even replace some of these wires. They're actually new wires. The end of stroke switch where that opens up to go from the power stroke into the actual hold coil. That's new. This new wire here as well. Did the same thing on this other side. So that all got new treatment. And now I'm going to move over to the back box. So just like the board that was inside the cabinet, the stepper units here also needed to have a little bit of attention. Just making sure that the switches were all correctly gapped, cleaned them where I needed to be. But most importantly, when you get over here to the actual contacts, again, you have to take this apart by pulling that nut apart, or pulling the nut off, and making sure that every single one of these little spring-loaded contacts, that they're moving correctly, cleaning them up, and then give all the little contact pads. They'll have to have a good scrubbing. Use Scotch-Brite is what I do. But basically, put it all back together. There's a little bit of a lithium grease, a little tiny little amount that goes actually on the contacts, or I'm sorry, lithium, I meant to say dielectric. There's a little bit of that I'll use. And other than that, the shaft that goes back, it's put back together dry. Generally, I don't want to use really any lubricant except for just that little bit that I'll put on the contacts here. Again, we got another stepper unit up here. Same treatment was done with it. All the scoring reels, or scoring units, the player one was the one that actually was having the most problems. It had contacts that they were touching, and it was really kind of strange because even though they looked like they should have been conducting, and I scrubbed them clean, I was still getting some issues, and it just took more work, more scrubbing on it, and just tightening up the gap a little bit more, and then it's working fine. But it had to do with, so in this case, I think it was the 10,000 digits. This is kind of opposite because we're looking on the back side, but I think this is considered the 10,000 unit. It basically, whatever number it was on, whenever you try to restart a game, it would not circle back to zero. And so anyways, that's all working great now. All the other the players were actually working fine, so they really didn't need much attention. But that's basically it for the backside. Just had to have it all out and give it a good once over with everything. Okay, so moving to the play field. So basically, like I said earlier, replaced all the rubber bands with silicone bands. I put pink ones here because they kind of go with the color of the game. I had reds on here originally, and they just didn't look good. Red against red, just you need to have some contrast. So I went with the pink. They actually look kind of nice, and everything else is using a white band. The whole play field, as I mentioned, there's a little bit of wear. That's funny. It's all a little bit of wear, but it's almost kind of camouflage. It doesn't really look too bad against the artwork. So I did actually go through and do what I could with polishing out the paint. I don't know if you can really see it in the glare or not. I guess it's kind of hard to see, but you can see a little bit. It was pretty dull, and by polishing it out, it looks a little bit better, and it's certainly smoother. And then after that, I put a couple coats of carnauba wax on, so it's pretty slick, and it should actually prevent really much more wear for maybe a very long time. But I think it'll hold up well. It plays really nice. It's just a nice arrangement. I mean, the game has really good action with the balls up with all the pop bumpers. It's pretty forgiving down here at the ball trough where this pops up. And you also have a gate that will open up at times where you can get your ball back. Pretty fun game. I guess the other thing I should mention, about the lights. These are the Comet, the warm white 2 SMD bulbs. They're clear lens in most cases. That's what I did for a lot of the, I guess you want to call it the general illumination that's above the playfield. All the lights that are underneath the inserts, they are a non-ghosting bulb. I used kind of a combination of some of their flex bulbs that would have 2 lights to be able to get it, like these in particular, to really get around the insert, around the switch that's underneath the insert to help light it up really nice. So those are done that way. There's some that just have a single head non-ghosting flex bulb. And then some of them just actually have just a standard bulb that's still non-ghosting. The pop bumper, this one was replaced because it's on a lot, and it was really kind of yellowed out and burnt kind of in the middle, so it just looked kind of bad. But yeah, that's not a problem now. Other little minor thing that I did. Now, a lot of the Williams and Gottlieb games, this whole ball guide that's in the back, there is a spot right about in this spot, and actually also here, that there will be a light bulb, and you don't see it that much, I mean, directly, other than it just kind of helps to light up the whole lanes back there, the lanes in that whole area. And this game didn't even have the sockets populated for it. So it had holes for it, but they weren't there. At least the holes were in the metal for it, because it's standard on all the games, but they didn't have it underneath the playfield. And part of the reason is because there's some other mechanisms that are down in the proximity, and it would kind of be in the way, but I found a way just to kind of carefully locate those sockets. So I ended up adding one on each side. I didn't put the second one in because that really was going to be a problem, but it's just a little tiny things kind of help make it look just a little bit nicer. But yeah, the game turned out really good, and we're going to give it a play. Okay, here we go. Post at the bottom that saves the ball in the drain is kind of nice. Oh, here we go. The thing is that white button that's right above, right here, you hit that. If you got that ball coming down and you think you're going to have a save and it hits that, you won't drain it. It'll trick you. All right, here we go. Look at that action, the pop bumpers. They can get pretty wild at times. Oh, come on back here. well, that's not the end of the game, but I'm gonna go ahead and stop it there. It's been a great game. I mean, it was great to go through and get it all working correctly, and you know, hoping to have this back to the owner, and he'll enjoy it, and hopefully be problem free for a very long time. Hope you enjoyed.